The winter wind howled through the cracks in the wooden walls, carrying with it the bitter promise of death, and Natalie Lawson knew with absolute certainty that she would not survive another week without food. She pressed her trembling hands against her hollow stomach, feeling the sharp angles of her ribs beneath her threadbare dress, and wondered which would kill her first, the cold or the hunger. Outside her small cabin on the edge of Ogden, Utah, snow had been falling for 3 days straight, burying the town under a suffocating blanket of white that seemed determined to erase all traces of human existence from the harsh landscape of 1883. Her father had died in September from a mining accident that left him crushed beneath a cave-in at the copper mine just outside town. Her mother had passed the previous spring from consumption, leaving Natalie alone at 18 to fend for herself in a world that had little patience for unmarried women without family connections. For a few months after her father's death, she had managed to scrape by doing laundry and mending for the more prosperous families in Ogden. But when the first snows came in November, the work had dried up faster than summer rain on desert stone. The townspeople had their own troubles to worry about. Winter in northern Utah was brutal, and with the early blizzards cutting off supply routes from Salt Lake City, everyone was hoarding what little they had. Natalie had gone door to door begging for work, for scraps, for anything that might keep her alive, but doors closed in her face more often than they opened. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, had told her plainly that she had no room for charity cases. Mr. Thornton at the general store had refused her credit, saying her father's debts were still outstanding and he would not throw good money after bad. Even the church, which had always prided itself on caring for the less fortunate, seemed to have forgotten she existed once the Reverend's wife decided that Natalie's presence at services was somehow inappropriate for a young woman without proper supervision. The isolation had been almost as painful as the hunger. She had watched from her frosted window as families gathered for Thanksgiving celebrations, as children played in the early snows, as the town moved on with its life, as though she were already dead and buried. The message was clear: Ogden, Utah had no place for her, and whatever happened to Natalie Lawson was her own problem to solve. Now, as December winds battered her cabin, she lay curled beneath every blanket she owned, all 3 of them moth-eaten and thin, trying to conserve what little warmth remained in her failing body. The last of her food had been eaten 4 days ago, a handful of dried beans that she had boiled in snow melt and forced down despite the way they sat like stones in her shrunken stomach. There was nothing left now. No flour, no salt, no dried meat, nothing but empty shelves and the growing certainty that she would die alone in this cabin while the town that had turned its back on her celebrated Christmas. She thought about her mother, about the way she had wasted away in that final month, her body consuming itself from the inside out. Natalie understood now what that felt like. Her arms were so thin she could wrap her fingers completely around her wrists. Her hair, once thick and auburn, had begun falling out in clumps. Her teeth felt loose in her gums. This was what starvation looked like, what it felt like, and there was no one coming to save her. The sound of horse hooves crunching through snow pulled her from the edge of unconsciousness. She had been drifting in and out for hours, losing track of time, losing track of everything except the cold and the hollow ache inside her. The hoofbeats stopped outside her cabin, and she heard the heavy thud of boots on her rickety porch. Someone knocked, a firm, solid sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. Natalie tried to call out, but her voice came as barely a whisper. She could not remember the last time she had spoken aloud. There was another knock, more insistent this time, and then the door creaked open. Cold air rushed in, stealing what little warmth remained, and she heard a man's voice, deep and concerned. "Jesus Christ," the voice said, and then footsteps crossed the floor quickly. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" She forced her eyes open and saw him kneeling beside her, a tall man with dark hair visible beneath his snow-dusted hat. Strong features weathered by sun and wind, gray eyes that widened in shock as he took in her condition. He was young, maybe mid-20s, dressed in a heavy sheepskin coat and worn denim that marked him as a working man. A cowboy, she thought distantly, noting the spurs on his boots and the way he carried himself with that particular confidence that came from spending more time with horses and cattle than people. "How long since you have eaten?" he asked, his hands already moving, checking her pulse at her wrist with surprising gentleness for such large, calloused hands. "For days," she managed to whisper. "Maybe 5. I lost count." He swore again, colorful language that would have scandalized the church ladies, and then he was moving fast, back outside to his horse. She heard him rummaging through saddlebags, heard him speaking softly to his mount, and then he was back inside with his arms full. He knelt beside her makeshift bed on the floor, where she had dragged every blanket in an attempt to stay warm, and pulled items from his coat pockets. "My name is Vincent Lawton," he said as he worked, breaking off a small piece of bread and pressing it gently into her hand. "I have been working a cattle drive up from Nevada, and we got caught in the storms. Lost half the herd in the blizzards, and I have been helping the rancher I work for track down strays. I saw the smoke from your chimney yesterday, thought it was strange there was so little of it, and when I passed by today and saw it had gone out completely, I figured someone might need help." Natalie stared at the bread in her hand as though it were a miracle. Her fingers shook so badly she could barely hold it. Vincent saw her struggle and helped guide her hand to her mouth. "Small bites," he instructed, his voice firm but kind. "Your stomach will not be able to handle much at first. We need to go slow or you will just bring it back up, and that will not help anybody." The bread tasted like heaven. She chewed slowly, forcing herself to follow his instructions even though every instinct screamed at her to devour it all at once. Vincent watched her carefully, and when she had managed to swallow 3 small bites, he gently took the bread away. "That is enough for now," he said. "We will wait a bit, let your body adjust, then you can have more." He stood and crossed to her cold fireplace, examining it with a practiced eye. "You are out of wood," he observed, and she nodded weakly. She had burned the last of it 2 days ago, had even considered breaking apart her only chair to feed the flames, but had lacked the strength to do it. Vincent went back outside, and she heard the sound of an axe biting into wood. He must have found the small woodpile beside her cabin, the one that had been empty for so long she had almost forgotten it existed. When he returned, he carried an armload of split logs and set about building a fire with efficient movements that spoke of long experience with such tasks. Soon flames were crackling in the hearth, and warmth began to seep back into the frozen cabin. Natalie felt tears sliding down her cheeks, hot against her cold skin. She could not remember the last time she had cried. There had been a point, maybe 2 weeks ago, when she had been too weak even for tears. Vincent returned to her side and wrapped one of his own blankets around her shoulders, a thick wool thing that smelled of horse and sage and open country. "The town did this to you?" he asked quietly, and there was something dangerous in his tone, a barely controlled anger that made her look at him more closely. "They have their own troubles," she whispered, though she did not know why she was defending them. "The winter came early. The supply routes are cut off. Everyone is just trying to survive. That does not explain why a young woman is alone in a cabin at the edge of town, starving to death while the rest of them still have smoke coming from their chimneys. Vincent said flatly. "What happened to your family?" She told him, her voice barely audible, about her mother's death and her father's accident, about the slow slide into poverty and isolation, about the doors that closed and the help that never came. Vincent listened without interrupting, his jaw tight, his eyes growing colder with each detail. When she finished, he stood abruptly and began unpacking supplies from the bundle he had brought in. "You will never go hungry again," he said, and there was such fierce certainty in his voice that she almost believed him. "I swear it on my life, Miss Lawson. Whatever else happens, you will never know hunger like this again." He pulled out a small pot and filled it with snow from outside, setting it near the fire to melt. Into it, he crumbled more of the bread, adding small pieces of dried beef and a pinch of salt from a pouch at his belt. "Beef tea," he explained. "My mother used to make it when we were sick. Easy on the stomach, but it will give you strength." While the mixture heated, Vincent explored the cabin, taking stock of her situation with the kind of methodical attention that suggested he was used to solving problems. He found her empty larder, her lack of proper winter clothing, the cracks in the walls that let in the brutal cold. His expression grew grimmer with each discovery. "This will not do," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "This will not do at all." When the beef tea was ready, he helped her sit up, supporting her weight with one strong arm around her shoulders, and spooned the warm liquid into her mouth with surprising patience. Natalie's stomach cramped at the first few swallows, her body not quite remembering how to process food, but Vincent made her pause, wait, breathe, and try again. Slowly, carefully, she managed to consume half the bowl before her stomach rebelled and she had to stop. "That is good," Vincent assured her, setting the bowl aside. "We will try again in an hour. By tomorrow you will be able to eat a bit more, and the day after that even more. Your body needs time to remember what food is." He eased her back down onto the blankets and added another log to the fire. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but inside the cabin was growing warmer, almost comfortable. Natalie watched Vincent as he moved around the small space, this stranger who had appeared out of the blizzard like an answer to a prayer she had stopped believing would be heard. He was handsome in a rough way, she realized, with a strong jaw shadowed with several days of beard growth, a straight nose that looked like it had been broken at least once, and those startling gray eyes that seemed to see everything. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, the question emerging before she could stop it. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Vincent paused in his work and looked at her directly. "I do not need to know you to see that what happened here is wrong," he said simply. "And I was raised to believe that when you see wrong being done, you step in and make it right. My pa would have boxed my ears from here to Sunday if I had ridden past someone in need." "Your parents raised you well," Natalie whispered. Something painful flickered across his face. "They tried their best. Pa died when I was 16, cattle stampede down in Colorado. Ma held on for another 2 years before her heart gave out. I think she died of missing him more than anything else. They were like that, my parents. Could not imagine a world without each other." There was a loneliness in his voice that Natalie recognized, the particular ache of being alone in a world that seemed designed for families and connections. "I am sorry," she said softly. "Me too," Vincent replied. "But that is life out here, is it not? Hard and fast and over before you know it. All the more reason to help where you can while you can." He settled down near the fire, close enough to tend it but giving her space. "I will stay tonight," he said. "Make sure you are stable and the fire stays lit. Do not worry about propriety or what the town might say. Right now all that matters is keeping you alive." Natalie wanted to protest, wanted to say something about her reputation, but the words would not come. The truth was she did not care what the town thought anymore. The town had made its position clear. Besides, Vincent Lawton had done more for her in 1 hour than Ogden had done in 3 months. If that earned him the right to stay by her fire, then so be it. She drifted in and out of sleep as the night wore on, waking periodically to find Vincent still there, still awake, tending the fire and keeping watch. Each time she woke, he gave her more of the beef tea, patient and gentle, until finally her stomach seemed to accept that food was real and available. The cramping eased. The hollow ache began to recede, just slightly, just enough to give her hope that she might actually survive this. Morning light filtered through the frost on her windows, gray and cold but undeniably real. Natalie woke to the smell of coffee, actual coffee, and the sound of Vincent moving around her cabin. She pushed herself up on one elbow, surprised to find she had the strength to do it, and watched as he poured the dark liquid into a tin cup. "Can you sit up?" he asked, and when she nodded, he helped her into a sitting position against the wall, wrapping blankets around her shoulders. He handed her the cup, his hand steadying hers when they trembled. "Small sips," he instructed. "It is hot and strong." The coffee was indeed both those things, and it was the most wonderful thing Natalie had tasted in months. Vincent settled down across from her with his own cup and regarded her seriously. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said. "You cannot stay here like this. The winter is only going to get worse, and even with food, you are in no condition to take care of yourself yet." "I have nowhere else to go," Natalie said quietly. "This cabin belonged to my parents. It is all I have left." "I understand that," Vincent said. "But right now, all you have left is going to become your tomb if we do not figure something else out. You need proper food, regular meals, warmth, and time to recover. This place cannot give you that." "What do you suggest?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. She knew what usually happened to women in her position. The boarding house if she was lucky, or worse if she was not. "The rancher I work for, Samuel Pritchard, has a place about 15 miles west of here," Vincent said. "Big spread, good setup. His wife Clara is always looking for help around the house, and they are decent people. I was thinking I could take you there, at least for the winter. You would have regular meals, a warm place to sleep, and work that would earn you money. Come spring, you could decide what you want to do, come back here, move on, whatever makes sense." Natalie stared at him. "You would do that, take me there, vouch for me to your employer." "I would," Vincent said without hesitation. "And I will. You deserve better than what this town gave you, Miss Lawson. Hell, anyone would deserve better than that, but especially someone who has already lost so much." She felt tears threatening again and blinked them back fiercely. "I do not know how to thank you." "Do not thank me yet," Vincent said with a slight smile. "Wait until you have met Mrs. Pritchard. She is a good woman, but she runs a tight ship and expects people to work for their keep. You will earn every bit of what she gives you." "I am not afraid of hard work," Natalie said firmly, and it was true. She had been working since she was old enough to hold a needle or carry a bucket. What she feared was charity, was being seen as a burden, was the vulnerability of depending on others. But she was practical enough to know that pride was a luxury she could not afford. If she stayed here, she would die. If she went with Vincent, she at least had a chance. "Then it is settled," Vincent said. "I will spend today getting you stable enough to travel, and tomorrow morning we will head out to the Pritchard Ranch. It is going to be a hard ride in your condition, but I will take it slow, and we will manage." He spent the rest of that day caring for her with a patience that seemed infinite. He went out and chopped more wood, stacking it inside where it would stay dry. He cooked simple meals, more beef tea, then a thin stew, then finally some bread with honey that his stomach could handle in small portions. He checked the walls of her cabin and stuffed rags into the worst of the cracks to keep out the wind. He even found her father's old coat hanging in the back of the cabin's single closet and helped her into it, wrapping her in layers of wool and leather that would protect her from the journey ahead. Between tasks, they talked. Vincent told her about his life as a cowboy, about the cattle drives that took him from Texas to Montana and everywhere in between, about the wild beauty of the open range and the hard realities of the work. He spoke of horses he had known and storms he had survived, of near misses with rustlers, and that one time he had helped pull a calf from a flooding river, only to have the mother cow try to gore him for his trouble. Natalie found herself laughing at his stories, actually laughing, something she had not done in so long. It felt strange and wonderful. In turn, she told him about her life before everything fell apart, about her mother's garden and her father's terrible singing voice, about the dreams she had once harbored of maybe becoming a teacher or opening a dress shop. Small dreams, modest dreams, but they had been hers. "You could still do those things," Vincent said thoughtfully. "Once you are back on your feet, once you have saved some money, no reason you could not." "Maybe," Natalie said, though she did not quite believe it. The future felt too uncertain, too far away to imagine. For now, it was enough just to think about tomorrow, about surviving the next day and the day after that. That night, with a full belly for the first time in weeks and the fire crackling warm, Natalie slept deeply and dreamlessly. When she woke the next morning, Vincent already had breakfast-ready cornmeal mush with bits of bacon stirred in, strong coffee, even a precious apple that he sliced thin so she could eat it slowly. "Eat what you can," he instructed. "It is going to be a long, cold ride, and you need all the strength you can get." She did her best, managing to finish most of what he served her. Afterward, Vincent helped her bundle into every piece of warm clothing they could find, layering until she could barely move. He wrapped scarves around her neck and face, pulled a hat down over her ears, and finally lifted her in his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "Not through 2 feet of snow you cannot," Vincent said matter-of-factly. He carried her out to where his horse waited, a sturdy bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a patient demeanor. Vincent settled her in the saddle, then swung up behind her, one arm wrapped securely around her waist to keep her steady. The ride to the Pritchard ranch was every bit as difficult as Vincent had warned. The cold bit through even her layers of clothing, and the motion of the horse, though gentle, exhausted her quickly. Vincent kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks, telling her stories, anything to keep her conscious and alert. When she sagged against him, he simply held her tighter, his body a wall of warmth at her back. They stopped twice to rest and let her drink water from Vincent's canteen. Each time he checked on her with genuine concern, making sure she was not too cold, not in too much pain. "Just a few more miles," he encouraged on the second stop. "You are doing so well, Miss Lawson. Just hold on a little longer." The Pritchard ranch appeared in the distance as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. It was a substantial operation, much larger than Natalie had expected, with a main house, several outbuildings, corrals full of cattle, and smoke rising from multiple chimneys. Vincent guided his horse down the long approach, and by the time they reached the main house, people had begun emerging to see who was arriving. A man in his 50s with a weathered face and kind eyes stepped off the porch. "Vincent," he called, his voice carrying clearly in the cold air. "We were starting to worry about you. Where have you been these past 2 days?" "I am sorry, Mr. Pritchard," Vincent called back. "I ran into a situation that required attention." He dismounted carefully, then reached up to lift Natalie down, holding her steady when her legs threatened to buckle. "This is Miss Natalie Lawson from Ogden. She has had some trouble, and I was hoping you and Mrs. Pritchard might have room for another pair of hands around the place." A woman appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Clara Pritchard was a handsome woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes took in Natalie's gaunt frame, her obvious weakness, and the way Vincent was supporting practically all her weight. Her expression shifted from curiosity to concern in an instant. "Good heavens," Clara said, hurrying down the steps. "Samuel, help Vincent get her inside. She looks half frozen and starved besides. Whatever the story is, it can wait until we have her warm and fed." Between Vincent and Samuel, they got Natalie into the house and settled into a chair near the kitchen stove. Clara immediately began bustling around, heating soup, pouring coffee, and issuing orders to a younger woman who appeared from another room. Within minutes, Natalie was wrapped in yet another blanket with hot food in front of her and the concerned faces of strangers surrounding her. Vincent told the story clearly, and without embellishment, how he had found her, the condition she had been in, the town that had abandoned her. Samuel's face grew darker with each detail, and Clara made small noises of distress and outrage. When Vincent finished, Samuel shook his head in disgust. "I never did like that town much," he said. "Too quick to judge, too slow to help, but this is beyond the pale. Letting a young woman starve rather than lifting a finger to help her." He looked at Natalie with something like apology in his eyes. "You are welcome here, Miss Lawson, for as long as you need. We can always use help, and anyone Vincent vouches for is good enough for me." "You will stay in the house," Clara added firmly. "The bunkhouse is no place for a woman, and besides, I need help with the cooking and cleaning now that my daughter has married and moved to Salt Lake City." "Can you cook, dear?" "Yes, madam," Natalie managed. "And sew and clean and do laundry. I can earn my keep, I promise." "I do not doubt it for a second," Clara said warmly. "But first, we need to get some weight back on you and some color in your cheeks. You look like a strong wind could blow you away. Vincent, you did right bringing her here." Vincent ducked his head, looking almost embarrassed by the praise. "Just did what needed doing, madam." Over the next few weeks, Natalie slowly came back to life. Clara fed her regularly, substantial meals that her stomach gradually learned to accept. Samuel gave her light tasks, at first darning socks, peeling potatoes, folding laundry, and gradually increased her responsibilities as her strength returned. The other ranch hands, a mix of cowboys and seasonal workers, treated her with respectful courtesy, and if they were curious about her story, they were polite enough not to pry. Vincent, she learned, was Samuel's most trusted hand, the man who could be counted on for anything from breaking difficult horses to managing the books when Samuel's eyes got too tired. He lived in the bunkhouse with the other unmarried men, but took his meals at the main house along with Samuel and Clara. This meant Natalie saw him 3 times a day, and she began to look forward to those moments with an intensity that surprised her. He would ask how she was feeling, what tasks Clara had assigned her, whether she needed anything. Small questions, ordinary questions, but asked with such genuine interest that they felt like more. Sometimes he would tell her about his day, a calf born in the middle of the night, a fence line that needed repair, a hawk he had seen circling over the south pasture. His voice had a quality that made even mundane details sound interesting, and Natalie found herself storing up her own observations to share with him. One evening in late December, as she helped Clara clean up after dinner, the older woman gave her a knowing look. "Vincent is a good man," Clara said casually, too casually. "One of the best we have ever had working here. Natalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Yes, madam. He saved my life. I will always be grateful to him." "Grateful is one thing," Clara said, her tone gentle but pointed. "But I have eyes in my head, dear, and I can see that what is growing between you two might be something more than gratitude. Not that I am complaining, mind you. Vincent deserves some happiness, and you are a lovely young woman. I am just saying that there is no need to hide it or be ashamed of it." "I do not know what you mean," Natalie protested weakly, but even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. She was developing feelings for Vincent, deep feelings that went far beyond simple gratitude. She thought about him constantly, found excuses to be in the same room, treasured every smile he gave her. It was foolish, probably, and premature given everything she had been through, but her heart did not seem to care about logic or timing. Clara just laughed and patted her arm. "Of course you do not, dear. Now, why do not you take this leftover pie out to the bunkhouse? The men always appreciate a treat, and I am sure Vincent especially will be pleased to see you." Natalie took the pie, knowing she had been maneuvered but not really minding. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and crossed the yard to the bunkhouse, a long, low building that smelled of tobacco and boot leather. She knocked, and one of the younger cowboys opened the door, his face breaking into a grin when he saw what she carried. "Miss Lawson bringing pie," he announced to the room. "Boys, this is what makes a hard day worth it." The men gathered around with good-natured enthusiasm, and Natalie found herself cutting slices and passing them out, accepting their thanks with a smile. Vincent was the last to approach, hanging back until the others had gotten their portions. When she handed him his slice, their fingers brushed, and the contact sent a jolt through her that was entirely inappropriate and entirely undeniable. "Thank you," Vincent said quietly, his gray eyes holding hers. "For the pie and for the company, it is good to see you looking so much better." "I have you to thank for that," Natalie said, just as quietly, "if you had not found me when you did." "But I did," Vincent interrupted gently. "And you are here now, safe and getting stronger every day. That is what matters." She wanted to say more, wanted to tell him that he mattered, that somewhere in the past few weeks he had become essential to her in a way she could not quite explain. But the bunkhouse was full of men, all of them pretending not to listen while absolutely listening, and this was not the time or place for such confessions. Instead, she simply smiled and said, "Enjoy the pie," before retreating back to the main house where Clara waited with a knowing expression and mercifully no questions. Christmas came and went with simple celebrations, a good meal, small gifts exchanged, carols sung around the piano that Clara played with more enthusiasm than skill. Natalie had not expected anything, but Vincent surprised her with a length of blue fabric, fine quality, enough to make a dress. "I noticed you only have the 2 dresses you have been switching between," he said, looking slightly embarrassed as he handed her the wrapped parcel. "Thought you might like something new. The color reminded me of your eyes." Natalie clutched the fabric to her chest, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of it. "Vincent, this is too much. I cannot accept something so expensive." "Sure you can," he said with a slight smile. "Consider it back payment for all those leftover pies you keep bringing to the bunkhouse. The boys and I have gotten spoiled having you around." She had made him a gift, too, a new shirt sewn from fabric Clara had given her, with careful stitches and buttons she had covered herself. When he opened it, his expression went soft in a way that made her heart skip. "It is beautiful work," he said, running his fingers over the seams. "Best shirt I have ever owned. Thank you, Natalie." It was the first time he had used her given name without the formal Miss, and hearing it in his deep voice did something to her, made her feel warm and valued and seen. They stood there in the Pritchards' parlor with the sounds of celebration around them, looking at each other, and Natalie felt the unspoken thing between them grow stronger, more undeniable. January brought bitter cold and storms that kept everyone close to the buildings. Natalie spent long hours in the kitchen with Clara, learning to bake bread for a dozen hungry men, mastering the art of making stew that would stick to ribs, and preserving what food they had against the long winter. She grew stronger with each passing day, the hollows filling out from her face, the trembling leaving her hands. By mid-January, she could keep up with a full day of work without needing to rest, and by the end of the month, Clara was trusting her with running the kitchen on her own. Vincent came in from checking on the cattle one evening covered in snow and shivering despite his heavy coat. Clara took one look at him and declared he needed hot soup and a warm bath before he caught his death. While Clara heated water on the stove, Natalie ladled soup into a bowl and sat with Vincent at the kitchen table as he ate. "It is brutal out there," he said between spoonfuls. "Lost 3 more head to the cold. Samuel is worried about the rest of the herd making it through to spring." "Can anything be done?" Natalie asked. "Not much, other than what we are already doing. Keep them in the sheltered valleys, break ice on the water sources, and pray the storms let up." He flexed his fingers, which were red and raw despite his gloves. "This is the worst winter I have seen in 5 years of working this territory." Without thinking, Natalie reached out and took one of his hands in both of hers, rubbing gently to help restore circulation. Vincent went very still, his eyes locked on their joined hands. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of water heating on the stove and the distant howl of wind outside. "Natalie," Vincent said softly, and there was something in his voice that made her look up. His gray eyes were intense, searching her face. "I need to tell you something, and I do not know if it is the right time, but I do not think I can keep it to myself much longer." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" "I have feelings for you," he said bluntly, the words tumbling out as though he had been holding them back for too long. "Strong feelings. It started that first day when I found you, this need to protect you to make sure you were safe. But then I got to know you, saw how hard you work, how brave you are, how you never complain even though you have every right to. And now I cannot imagine not having you in my life. I know it is fast. I know you might not feel the same way, but I had to tell you. You deserve to know." Natalie stared at him, her heart racing so fast she felt dizzy. "You have feelings for me," she repeated, hardly daring to believe it. "I do," Vincent confirmed. "Real, serious feelings. The kind that keep me up at night thinking about you. The kind that make me look for excuses to come to the main house, just so I can see your face. The kind that make me want to call you mine, and know that you are safe and happy for the rest of your life." "Oh," Natalie breathed, and then she was smiling, a smile so wide it almost hurt. "Vincent, I have feelings for you too. I have for weeks now. I thought I was being foolish, thought it was too soon, but I cannot help how I feel. You saved my life, yes, but you also made me want to live again. You made me believe that maybe I could have a future, that maybe I could be happy. And every time I see you, every time you smile at me, I feel like maybe that future could include you." Vincent's face transformed, relief and joy chasing away the worry. "You mean it. You really feel the same." "I really do," Natalie confirmed. And then she was in his arms, pulled close against his chest, his warmth surrounding her. He held her carefully, as though she were something precious, and she wrapped her arms around his waist and held on tight. "I want to court you properly," Vincent said into her hair. "Do this right. I know we are already living under the same roof, more or less, but I want to take you on walks, bring you flowers when spring comes, ask Samuel's permission to take you into town for socials. I want everyone to know that you are my girl and that I am the luckiest man in Utah territory." "I would like that," Natalie said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "All of it. I would like all of it very much." They stood there holding each other until Clara came back into the kitchen and cleared her throat meaningfully. "Well," she said, her eyes twinkling with amusement, "I see things have progressed while I was fetching more towels. Should I assume we will be needing to discuss wedding plans sometime in the near future?" Vincent and Natalie sprang apart, both of them blushing, and Clara laughed. "Oh, do not look so scandalized. I told you weeks ago that I have eyes in my head. I am happy for you both. Vincent, you are a good man, and Natalie, you deserve someone who will treat you right. Now, Vincent, your bath is ready, and Natalie, you can stop pretending you have more work to do in here and go get some rest. You will have plenty of time to make moon eyes at each other tomorrow." February brought a slight warming trend, and with it came the opportunity for Vincent to make good on his promise to court Natalie properly. He took her on walks around the ranch, pointing out the first signs of spring, the slight swelling of buds on the cottonwood trees, the tracks of small animals emerging from their winter dens, the way the light was slowly staying longer each evening. He brought her small gifts, a smooth stone from the creek, a hawk feather he had found, a handful of dried wildflowers he had saved from the previous summer. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories, sharing their hopes and fears. Vincent told her about growing up in Colorado, about the wanderlust that had driven him to leave and see the world, about the loneliness that came with a life spent always moving from place to place. Natalie told him about the dreams she had harbored before her parents died, about the weight of grief, about the terror of those final days in her cabin when she thought she would die alone and forgotten. "You will never be alone again," Vincent promised her one evening as they stood watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and pink. "Not as long as I am breathing. I will be here, Natalie, always." "That is a big promise," she said softly, leaning against his side. "I know," Vincent said, "but I mean every word. I love you, Natalie Lawson. I have loved you since the moment I saw you fighting to survive even when the world had given up on you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love the way you sing while you work and the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating on something difficult. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how much." Natalie turned to face him, her eyes shining with tears. "I love you too, Vincent. I did not think I would ever feel this way about anyone, did not think I would get the chance. But here you are and here I am, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Vincent cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had spilled over. "Then marry me," he said. "I know I do not have much to offer. I am just a cowboy with a few dollars saved and no land to call my own. But I will work hard for you, Natalie. I will build you a life, a home, a future. I will make sure you never go hungry again, never feel cold or scared or alone. Marry me, and I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you are happy." "Yes," Natalie said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Vincent Lawton. Nothing would make me happier." He kissed her then, a gentle kiss that tasted of promise and hope, and Natalie felt something inside her finally settle, finally find peace. She had survived the worst thing she could imagine, had clawed her way back from the edge of death, and here on the other side was Vincent, offering her a future she had never dared dream possible. They told Samuel and Clara that night, and both were genuinely delighted. Samuel clapped Vincent on the back and pronounced him a smart man for recognizing quality when he saw it. Clara hugged Natalie and immediately began planning the wedding, talking about flowers and cakes and whether they should get married in Ogden's church or find a traveling minister to come to the ranch. "We do not need anything fancy," Natalie protested. "Just something simple." "Nonsense," Clara said firmly. You are only going to get married once, and we are going to do it right. Besides, I have been dying for an excuse to throw a party, and this is the perfect reason. You let me handle the details, dear. All you need to do is show up and look beautiful, which you will do without even trying. March arrived with muddy roads and the first green shoots pushing through the last of the snow. Wedding preparations proceeded with surprising speed, driven primarily by Clara's enthusiasm and organizational skills. She enlisted the help of the ranch wives from neighboring properties, and soon fabric was being cut for a wedding dress, food was being planned for the reception, and invitations were being written out in Clara's careful hand. Vincent spent his free time working on a surprise for Natalie. With Samuel's permission and help, he was building them a small cabin on the eastern edge of the Pritchard property, a place of their own where they could start their married life. It was simple but well built, with a good stove, a sturdy roof, and windows that let in plenty of light. Samuel had offered them the land free and clear as a wedding gift, along with a small herd of cattle that would be theirs to build on. "You have been my best hand for 5 years," Samuel told Vincent as they raised the cabin's walls. "You have earned this and more. Besides, I am getting older, and I like the idea of having people I trust nearby. You build your life here, raise your family, and when the time comes that I cannot manage this place anymore, maybe we will talk about you taking over as foreman permanently." Vincent was overwhelmed by the generosity. "Sir, I do not know what to say." "Say you will take care of that girl," Samuel replied. "Say you will give her the life she deserves. That is all the thanks I need." The wedding was set for the first Sunday in April, a bright, clear day that felt like a blessing after the brutal winter. Natalie wore the dress Clara and the other women had made, a simple but beautiful creation in cream-colored fabric with lace at the collar and cuffs. Clara wove wildflowers into her hair, which had grown thicker and healthier with proper food and care. When Natalie looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the gaunt, desperate girl from that cabin in Ogden. She looked alive, healthy, happy. She looked like a bride. Vincent waited for her at the front of the Pritchard's parlor, which had been decorated with more wildflowers and ribbons. He wore a new suit that Clara had insisted on purchasing for him, and his hair was neatly trimmed, his jaw freshly shaved. When Natalie entered the room on Samuel's arm, Vincent's face lit up with such joy that she felt tears threaten her careful composure. The ceremony was performed by a traveling minister who made the circuit through the isolated ranches. He spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together, about the sacred bond of marriage. Vincent slipped a simple gold band onto Natalie's finger, a ring he had bought with his carefully saved wages, and she placed one on his hand in return. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her with such tenderness that several of the watching women dabbed at their eyes. The reception was a lively affair with food and music and dancing. The ranch hands and neighboring families had all turned out to celebrate, and there was genuine warmth in their congratulations. Even some people from Ogden had come, though Natalie noticed they were the ones who had been kind to her before everything fell apart, the ones who had tried to help but been outnumbered by the rest. One of them, an older woman named Mrs. Patterson, approached Natalie as the evening wore on. "My dear," she said quietly, taking Natalie's hands in her own, "I owe you an apology. We all do, really, but I can only speak for myself. I knew you were struggling after your father passed. I should have done more. I should have insisted on helping, should have stood up to those who said it was not our problem. I am so sorry for what you went through." Natalie looked at this woman who had always been kind to her, who had occasionally slipped her extra vegetables from her garden or paid more than necessary for mending work, and felt the old anger drain away. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "It means more than you know. But I survived, and I found something better than what I had before. I found Vincent, and I found a real home. So maybe, in a strange way, everything happened exactly as it was supposed to." Mrs. Patterson smiled through tears. "You are generous to say so. You have become a lovely young woman, Natalie, and I am so happy to see you looking so well. That husband of yours is clearly besotted with you, and from what I hear, he is a good man. You deserve all the happiness in the world." As the night drew to a close, Vincent and Natalie said their goodbyes and walked hand in hand to their new cabin. Vincent had lit lamps before the ceremony, and the small space glowed warm and welcoming. He lifted her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in what was now their home. "Mrs. Lawton," he said, pulling her close. "How does that sound?" "It sounds perfect," Natalie replied, reaching up to loop her arms around his neck. "Everything is perfect. This day, this place, you, all of it." "I meant what I said that first day," Vincent told her, his voice serious. "You will never go hungry again. You will never be cold or alone or afraid. I will spend the rest of my life making sure of it." "I know," Natalie said softly. "I believe you, Vincent. And I promise you the same. We will take care of each other, build a life together, face whatever comes as a team. That is what marriage is, right?" "That is exactly what marriage is," Vincent agreed. And then he was kissing her, deep and passionate, and Natalie felt the last of her fear and pain finally release its hold on her heart. Their first year of marriage was full of hard work and simple joy. Vincent continued working for Samuel while also building up their own small herd. Natalie managed their cabin, grew a garden that produced more vegetables than they could eat themselves, and helped Clara with the main house when extra hands were needed. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side during the day and falling into each other's arms at night. Summer brought long, warm days perfect for working outside. Vincent taught Natalie to ride properly, not just sitting in a saddle while someone else controlled the horse, but actually riding, controlling the animal, feeling the freedom of moving fast across open ground. She learned to rope calves, to mend fences, to do a dozen tasks that ranching life required. In turn, she taught him some of the finer points of cooking and household management that his bachelor years had left him ignorant of. They discovered each other slowly, learning what made the other laugh, what caused worry, what brought comfort. Vincent liked his coffee strong and black, enjoyed reading when he had the time, and had a surprisingly good singing voice that he only revealed when he thought no one was listening. Natalie loved watching sunrises, had a talent for growing things, and could never resist helping any animal in distress, which led to them acquiring a small menagerie of injured creatures that she nursed back to health. Fall brought the work of preparing for winter, and this year Natalie faced it with confidence instead of terror. Their cabin was snug and well-stocked. Their root cellar was full of preserved food. They had firewood stacked high and warm clothes in the closet. When the first snow fell in November, Vincent found her standing at the window watching the flakes drift down with a peaceful expression. "You all right?" he asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "More than all right," Natalie said, leaning back against him. "I was just thinking about last winter, about how different everything is now. A year ago I was starving and alone, certain I was going to die. Now I have you and this home and a future. It is almost hard to believe sometimes." "Believe it," Vincent said firmly. "This is real, Natalie. This is your life now, our life. And it is only going to get better." He was right. That winter, while cold, was nothing like the previous year's brutal onslaught. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other or simply talking, wrapped in quilts in each other's company. When Christmas came, they exchanged small gifts and shared a quiet dinner, and Natalie thought she had never been so content. In February, Natalie realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had waited to be certain before saying anything. When she finally told Vincent, he went completely still, staring at her as though he could not quite process the words. "A baby," he said finally. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Natalie confirmed, smiling at his stunned expression. "Sometime in late summer, I think." "How do you feel about that?" Vincent let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to the main house and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "How do I feel? I feel like the luckiest man alive. I feel like I need to build a cradle and get more supplies and make sure you are taking care of yourself. Are you feeling all right? Do you need anything? Should you be resting?" "Vincent, I am fine," Natalie assured him, cupping his face in her hands. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am healthy and strong, and I have you to take care of me. Everything is going to be fine." But she could see the worry in his eyes, the fear he was trying to hide. "Hey," she said softly, "talk to me. What are you thinking?" "I am thinking about how fragile life is," Vincent admitted. "I'm thinking about my mother, how she was never quite the same after my younger sister was born. I am thinking about all the things that can go wrong, and I am terrified of losing you." Natalie's heart melted at his honesty. "You are not going to lose me," she said firmly. "I am tough, remember. I survived starvation and winter and everything the world threw at me. I can handle having a baby. Besides, Clara has delivered half the babies in this county. She will make sure everything goes smoothly." Vincent took a shaky breath and nodded. "You are right. I am being foolish. It is just that you mean everything to me, Natalie. The thought of anything happening to you terrifies me more than anything else in the world." "Then we will face it together," Natalie said. "Just like we face everything else. Together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and into summer. Natalie bloomed with it, her body filling out in new ways, her energy remaining strong despite the changes. Clara was indeed a wealth of knowledge and experience, guiding Natalie through what to expect, and what was normal versus what required concern. Vincent was attentive to the point of being comical, constantly trying to take tasks away from her or insisting she rest, when she felt perfectly capable of working. "I am pregnant, not dying," she finally told him in exasperation when he tried to prevent her from carrying in a basket of laundry. "Women work right up until they give birth." "I am fine, Vincent. You need to relax." "I am trying," Vincent said, running a hand through his hair. "But every time I see you lifting something or stretching to reach something, I imagine all the terrible things that could happen, and I cannot help myself." Natalie softened and took his hand, placing it on her rounded belly where the baby had recently started making its presence known through kicks and rolls. "Feel that?" she asked as a strong kick landed against Vincent's palm. His eyes went wide with wonder. "That is our baby, strong and healthy." "Everything is fine, Vincent. Trust that everything will be fine." From that moment, Vincent seemed to find some peace with the situation. He still worried, but he channeled it into productive preparation, building a cradle from smooth pine, gathering soft fabrics for baby clothes, making sure they had everything they would need when the time came. The baby arrived on a warm August evening, after a labor that Clara pronounced blessedly quick for a first child. Vincent paced outside the cabin for hours while Natalie worked through the contractions with Clara, and another ranch wife coaching her through it. When the baby's first cries rang out, Vincent burst through the door to find Natalie exhausted but smiling, cradling a squirming bundle. "It is a boy," she said, her voice tired but full of joy. "We have a son, Vincent." Vincent approached almost reverently, looking down at the tiny red face peeking out from the blankets. "He is perfect," he breathed. "Natalie, he is absolutely perfect. You are perfect. I cannot believe you just did that." "Women have been doing it for millennia," Clara said dryly from where she was cleaning up. "But yes, she did wonderfully. Strong baby, good lungs, 10 fingers and 10 toes. You should be very proud." They named him Thomas, after Vincent's father, and from the moment he entered their lives, he became the center of their world. Vincent was a devoted father, patient with the crying and the sleepless nights, amazed by every small development. Natalie found motherhood both harder and more rewarding than she had expected, but with Vincent's support and Clara's advice, she managed. Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's gray eyes and his mother's auburn hair. He was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Grace, and then 2 years after that by another son they called James. The cabin that had once seemed spacious became crowded with the noise and chaos of children, and Vincent began planning an addition that would give them more room. Samuel retired and made Vincent his full foreman, officially putting him in charge of the entire ranch operation. It came with a raise in pay and more responsibility, but also with Samuel's complete trust and confidence. Vincent proved himself more than capable, managing the ranch hands, dealing with buyers, and making decisions that kept the operation profitable even in difficult years. Natalie expanded her garden and began raising chickens, selling eggs and vegetables to the other ranch families, and even some of the stores in Ogden. The money she earned she saved carefully, with an eye toward the future and the security it would bring. She had not forgotten what it was like to be without, and she was determined that her children would never know that kind of desperation. The years passed in the way years do, marked by seasons and harvests and the steady growth of their children. Thomas grew tall and serious, taking after his father in temperament and his love of working with animals. Grace was bright and curious, always asking questions and getting into good-natured trouble. James was the baby for several years until another daughter, Rose, arrived when Natalie was 30. Through it all, Vincent and Natalie's love deepened and matured. The passionate urgency of their early days together mellowed into something steadier but no less intense. They worked as partners in all things, making decisions together, supporting each other through difficulties, celebrating successes as a team. There were hard times, droughts that killed cattle, illnesses that scared them, accidents that required recovery, but they faced it all together, and their bond only grew stronger. One winter evening, nearly 15 years after Vincent had first found Natalie starving in her cabin, they sat together on the porch of their expanded home, watching the sunset and enjoying a rare moment of peace while the children played inside. Natalie leaned against Vincent's shoulder, his arm warm around her, and thought about the strange path her life had taken. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, and she smiled at how well he knew her, how he could always tell when her mind was wandering. "I was thinking about that first winter," she admitted, "about how close I came to dying, how I had given up hope, and then you appeared like something out of a story and changed everything." "Best decision I ever made, going to check on that cabin," Vincent said. "Found the love of my life, got to build a family with her, got to watch her become this amazing woman who runs half the county and raises 4 incredible children. I am the one who got lucky, Natalie." "We both got lucky," Natalie corrected. "We found each other when we both needed someone. We built something real and lasting. We survived and thrived. That is not luck, Vincent. That is love and hard work and commitment." "You are right," Vincent agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Every hard day, every challenge, every moment of worry all worth it because it led to this. To you, to our family, to this life we have built." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. From inside came the sound of children's laughter, Thomas playing some game with his younger siblings that had them all shrieking with delight. It was the sound of home, of happiness, of a future secured through love and determination. Natalie thought about the girl she had been, alone and starving and certain she would die forgotten. She thought about the man who had appeared through the snow and made her a promise, "You will never go hungry again," and kept that promise every single day since. She thought about the children they had raised and the life they had built and the love that sustained it all. "Thank you," she said quietly, and Vincent looked down at her with those gray eyes that still made her heart skip. "For what?" he asked. "For saving my life," Natalie said. "For loving me, for giving me this family and this home and this beautiful life, for keeping your promise, for everything." Vincent tightened his arm around her and smiled. "You saved my life too," he said. "I was just drifting before I found you, going from place to place without any real purpose. You gave me a reason to stay, a reason to build something permanent. You gave me a home, Natalie. You gave me everything that matters." As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and the first chill of evening settled around them, they rose and went inside together, to the warmth and noise and beautiful chaos of their family. The door closed behind them, shutting out the cold, and through the windows, the glow of lamplight spilled out into the night like a beacon, a symbol of life and love, and the unbreakable bond between two people who had found each other in the darkest of times and built something bright and lasting together. Years continued to pass, each one adding new chapters to their story. Thomas grew into a fine young man who took over much of the daily ranch work, eventually marrying a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch and building his own cabin nearby. Grace became a teacher, using the books and education her mother had insisted she receive to teach the children of ranch families throughout the county. James developed a talent for working with horses, training them with a patience and skill that had buyers coming from as far as Wyoming. Rose, the youngest, showed early signs of inheriting her mother's skill with growing things and her father's business sense, a combination that promised great things for her future. Vincent and Natalie transitioned from young parents to middle age with grace, their hair graying at the temples, their hands growing more weathered but no less capable. They watched their children grow and flourish with pride, knowing that they had given them the stability and love that would serve as a foundation for their own futures. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Vincent surprised Natalie with a trip to Salt Lake City, their first time away from the ranch in years. They stayed in a hotel, ate in restaurants, and wandered through shops like young people courting for the first time. It was strange and wonderful to have time alone together, to remember who they had been before children and responsibilities had filled their lives. "You have any regrets?" Vincent asked her one evening as they walked through the city streets, his hand warm in hers. Natalie considered the question seriously. She thought about the hardships she had endured, the pain of losing her parents, the terror of that winter when she had nearly starved. She thought about the hard work of building a life from nothing, the sleepless nights with sick children, the worry that came with raising a family in harsh country. "No," she said finally, "no regrets at all. I would not change a single thing, because everything that happened brought me to you and brought us to where we are now. Our life has been hard sometimes, but it has also been beautiful. I have been loved and cherished every single day for 20 years. How many people can say that?" "Not nearly enough," Vincent agreed. "And I feel the same way. You have made me happier than I ever imagined possible. You gave me a home when I was wandering, gave me children to love and raise, gave me purpose and meaning. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Natalie Lawton, and I thank God every single day that I decided to check on that cabin. They returned to the ranch refreshed and ready to face whatever came next. More years passed, bringing grandchildren who delighted them, new challenges that tested them, and the steady accumulation of memories that made up a well-lived life. Samuel and Clara passed peacefully within months of each other, both having lived long, productive lives. They left the ranch to Vincent and Natalie completely, recognizing that they had been the ones truly running it for years anyway. It was bittersweet, inheriting the full property but losing the people who had been so instrumental in their happiness. By the time Vincent turned 50, he and Natalie were the old guard, the ones the younger generation came to for advice and support. They had built not just a successful ranch but a legacy, a family that was strong and close-knit, children and grandchildren who loved each other and worked together. One spring day, as Natalie worked in her expanded garden with her granddaughter helping, Vincent came walking across the yard with a letter in his hand. His expression was strange, somewhere between amused and nostalgic. "What is it?" Natalie asked, straightening up and brushing dirt from her hands. "Letter from the mayor of Ogden," Vincent said, shaking his head. "Apparently they are putting together some kind of historical society, documenting the stories of the area's early settlers. They want to interview us, record our story for posterity." Natalie laughed, genuinely surprised. "They want our story. The town that left me to starve wants to celebrate how I survived." "The irony is not lost on me either," Vincent said dryly. "What do you want to do?" "We could ignore it, or we could agree and set the record straight about what actually happened." Natalie thought about it for a long moment, looking around at the prosperous ranch, the beautiful garden, the grandchildren playing in the yard. She thought about the life she had built despite Ogden's indifference, about the family that surrounded her with love, about the man who had kept his promise for more than 20 years. "Let us do it," she said finally. "Let us tell our story, the whole story. Not for them, but for our children and grandchildren. So they understand where they came from, what we overcame, how much their lives are worth. And maybe, just maybe, so that the next time someone in Ogden is struggling and alone, someone will remember and do better." They gave the interview together, sitting side by side in their comfortable parlor, holding hands as they recounted those early days. Vincent told of finding Natalie nearly dead from starvation, of his determination to save her. Natalie spoke honestly about the town's abandonment of her, but also about the second chances and the love that had healed those wounds. They talked about building their life together, about the ranch and their children and the community they had created. The historian taking notes looked increasingly moved as the story unfolded. When they finished, she set down her pen and looked at them with obvious emotion. "That is an incredible story," she said. "A love story, certainly, but also a story about survival and resilience and the power of one person choosing to do the right thing. Thank you for sharing it." After she left, Vincent pulled Natalie close. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Good," Natalie said, and realized it was true. It felt good to tell it, to acknowledge what happened, but also to show what came after. "We have had a good life, Vincent. Better than good. We have had a beautiful life." "We have," Vincent agreed, "and we are not done yet. We have got plenty of years left in us, more grandchildren to meet, more sunrises to watch together." He was right, of course. They did have more years, good years filled with the love of their growing family and the satisfaction of work well done. They watched their children become respected members of the community, watched their grandchildren grow, and even lived to see a few great-grandchildren born. Vincent passed first, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, with Natalie holding his hand. His last words to her were the same as his first promise: "You will never go hungry again." And then he was gone, leaving Natalie with a grief that was profound but not bitter. She had been blessed with nearly 40 years of marriage to a man who had loved her unconditionally, who had kept every promise he ever made, who had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by family, still sharp and capable despite her age. She spent those years telling stories to anyone who would listen, making sure the grandchildren and great-grandchildren knew their history, understood where they came from. She wanted them to know about the desperate girl who had nearly died one winter and the cowboy who had refused to let that happen. She wanted them to understand that love was not just a feeling but a choice, a commitment, a promise kept day after day after day. When Natalie finally passed at 78, it was peacefully, in the same cabin Vincent had built for them all those years ago. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her, and her last conscious thought was of Vincent, of his gray eyes and gentle hands, of the way he had held her that very first night and promised her everything would be all right. She was buried next to Vincent on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstones were simple, just their names and dates, but below those facts someone had carved a single line: "He saved her, and she saved him." The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management, then his sons after him. The family that Vincent and Natalie had created spread and grew, becoming an integral part of the community. The story of how it all began, of the town that left a girl to starve, and the cowboy who had refused to accept that outcome, became family legend, told and retold with each generation. And sometimes, on winter evenings when the snow fell soft and silent over northern Utah, family members would look out at the peaceful landscape and think about that long-ago day when Vincent had ridden through a blizzard to check on a cabin with barely any smoke coming from its chimney. They would think about how one choice, one act of compassion, one promise kept, had changed everything. They would think about the love that had grown from that desperate moment, love that had created a legacy lasting far beyond any single lifetime. The cabin where Natalie had nearly died was long gone, absorbed back into Ogden as the town grew and modernized. But the cabin Vincent had built, the home where they had raised their children and built their life, still stood more than a century later, preserved by the family as a reminder of where they came from. Visitors would walk through it and marvel at how small it was, how simple, and family members would smile and explain that it was not the size of the house that mattered, but the size of the love that had filled it. "You will never go hungry again," Vincent had promised, and he had kept that promise every day of his life. But the promise had been bigger than just food, bigger than just physical survival. He had promised her a future, a family, a life filled with love and purpose and meaning. He had promised her that she would never be alone, never be forgotten, never be abandoned again. And he had kept that promise day after day, year after year, until the promise itself became a legacy that outlived them both, living on in the hearts and memories of all who came after them. The story of Vincent and Natalie Lawton became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of love to transform lives, to the importance of keeping promises, to the way one person's compassion could ripple outward to affect generations. It became a reminder that even in the darkest moments, when hope seems lost and death seems certain, salvation can arrive in unexpected forms, sometimes in the shape of a cowboy riding through a blizzard, refusing to pass by someone in need. And perhaps most importantly, it became a love story for the ages, A reminder that true love was not just about passion or romance, but about showing up, about keeping promises, about choosing every single day to care for and cherish the person you have committed your life to. It was about building something together, brick by brick, day by day, until you looked back and realized you had created something beautiful and lasting that would echo forward through time. Vincent and Natalie's story began with hunger and desperation, with a town's cruelty and a stranger's compassion. But it became a story of love triumphant, of promises kept, of a life built on the foundation of one man's determination to make sure one woman never suffered again. It became proof that even the darkest winters eventually give way to spring, that even the most desperate circumstances can transform into joy, and that love, real love, has the power to save us in ways we never imagined possible. Their story, that story of the town that left her to starve, and the cowboy who brought food and promised she would never go hungry again, lived on long after they were both gone. It lived on in the ranch that still bore their name, in the family that still gathered there for holidays and celebrations, in the values of compassion and commitment that they had instilled in their children, and that had been passed down through every generation since. And on cold winter nights, when snow blanketed the Utah landscape and families gathered warm and safe around their fires, the story would be told again. Parents would tell their children about great-great-great-grandparents who had loved each other so much that their love had built a dynasty. They would talk about promises kept and lives saved, and the power of one person choosing to do the right thing. And the children would listen, wide-eyed and captivated, understanding in that way children do that they were hearing something important, something that explained who they were and where they came from. They would understand that they existed because once, long ago, a cowboy had refused to let a young woman die alone in a cabin, had brought her food and warmth and hope, and had loved her so completely that his love had echoed forward through time to touch their lives more than a century later. It was a good story, a true story, and a love story in the best and truest sense of the word. It was the story of Vincent and Natalie Lawton, of the town that failed them and the love that saved them both, of promises made and kept and the beautiful life that had grown from those dark beginnings. And it was a story that would never be forgotten, because the best stories never are. They live on in hearts and minds and memories, passed down from generation to generation, reminding us all of what is possible when we choose love over indifference, when we keep our promises, and when we refuse to let the cruelty of the world extinguish our capacity for compassion. You will never go hungry again. 5 simple words that had meant everything, that had changed everything, that had promised not just food but a future, not just survival but a life worth living. 5 words that had been kept for 40 years and had echoed forward for more than a century, becoming a family motto, a guiding principle, a reminder of what had started it all. In the end, that was the legacy Vincent and Natalie Lawton left behind, not just a successful ranch or a large family or material prosperity, though they had built all those things. Their real legacy was the proof that love could triumph over the worst circumstances, that one person's compassion could change the course of countless lives, and that promises, when made with a true heart and kept with steadfast determination, had the power to create something that would last forever. Their story had begun with an ending the near death of a desperate young woman in a frozen cabin. But it had transformed into a beginning, the start of something beautiful and enduring that would outlive them both and touch lives they would never meet. It was the best kind of story, the kind that reminded people why love mattered, why compassion was worth the risk, why promises were sacred things to be honored and kept. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Vincent and Natalie Lawton were together still, their love undiminished by death, their promises still kept, their story still unfolding in the lives of all those who came after them. Because that is what true love does. It transcends time and circumstance and even death itself, living on in the legacy it creates and the lives it touches. The town of Ogden, Utah had left her to starve in that brutal winter of 1883. But Vincent Lawton had brought food and promised she would never go hungry again. And from that promise, from that choice, from that love, had grown something far greater than either of them could have imagined: a family, a legacy, and a love story that would be told and retold for generations to come, inspiring others to choose compassion over indifference, to keep their promises no matter the cost, and to believe in the transformative power of love. It was, in the end, exactly the kind of story the West was built on: stories of survival and second chances, of hard work and harder winters, of people who refused to give up even when everything seemed lost. But it was also something more, something deeper and more enduring. It was a love story, pure and simple, and those are the stories that matter most of all.